Okay, what we're going to demonstrate today is some customizations that we've done within the M1 application. One of the biggest advantages to M1 is the ability for the end user to customize it to suit their needs. And it does have a product configurator where if you have a product that has multiple options and so on, you can configure that product and have it generate the BOM based on your configuration. To start out, I'm going to demonstrate their base configurator and kind of show how it works, and then I'll demonstrate mine that I've created. And so, for example, this is just basically a sample part, basically kind of like a custom built personal computer. And what they tell you to do is make a fully generated bill of materials that has every possible material that you could use in it. And so in this case I have my cases, my processors. Let me zoom in here a little bit. The motherboards, hard drives, and DVD-ROM. And so when you run it through their configurator wizard, what it looks like is this. And then I just hit OK. I don't have any sub-assemblies in here. Brings up this standard warning message. And then what it does is it basically creates the form, and I'll show you what the form looks like. And so basically this is my configurator form that would pull up in a sales order or in a job. And basically what I would have to do is the salesperson or the person creating the job would have to check which case they wanted, which processor, motherboard, hard drive, and DVD-ROM. And basically it defaults to bring in checkboxes. Now this is their base configurator wizard, and you can go in behind the scenes and further customize it, add in your own controls, combo boxes, radial buttons, and so on, and even rearrange the checkboxes. And as you'll see, to really customize the configurator screen to how you want it, it does take some programming ability, and you have to know VB-script and some SQL commands to run it. And so here is the designer with the configurator. As I can rearrange the controls, I can add in my new controls like a combo box and set the values there, even radial buttons. You can add in your own VB-script logic to set values and so on. The thing I didn't like about that is I didn't want to have to modify these screens every time we decided to add an option to one of our products. And even if you look at their manual for the configurator, then it does tell you that the wizard, it says as we saw with the wizard, it will create a very basic product configurator, but it is very limited. You can go in and modify the configurator and add additional code and proceed. But it's also as easy to build it from the start and run forward. Now it says it's easy, but you do have to be know some programming. Here's one of the functions, a combination of VB-script and SQL, some more code that you'd have to put in. You can get pretty elaborate on your code. This function here is basically how they populate one of the combo boxes. Kind of show you what additional options you do have with the configurator. Here is a list of fields that you can set the values on. For example, your unit sell price, you can create a rule here. Now this is a very simple example. As you can see, we have a whole bunch of checkbox controls that you can get pretty elaborate. This is basically just simple VB-script, but again, to change pricing or some of these options, you do need to come in here and program it. Same with your bill of materials. What it does is it basically puts in a default formula. When it generates your bill of materials, it basically says if this checkbox is checked, then I'm going to include this particular part in my bill of materials, otherwise it won't be included. Anyways, you can get again elaborate on these formulas, and it can get quite involved depending on your bill of materials and how many options you are going to offer on your product. So now what I'm going to do is jump in and show you that basically the same product on our custom configurator system, and I'll just create a new revision here that I'll just call custom. I'm just going to add in a weight. And what we've done too with the configurator is we can actually calculate the weight based on the options. And so I'm just going to throw a weight in here maybe 5 pounds default weight, and you'll see how this works later on. And so what I've created is a custom form to track my options, and really in this case I just have a few options. The first one is going to be my case type. Anyways, I have an option ID, and then I have a list sequence. The option ID is the unique ID that doesn't change. The list sequence is the sequence in which that option will show up in the configurator screen. You can change this later on. A code is basically just going to be a unique code that I name that option. It's really used behind the scenes, and it's going to be what the system names that control behind the scenes to refer to it. And once you set the code, you won't be able to change it later. My display type is how I want this option to be displayed. And so my options here, I can show it as a combo box, a checkbox, or a radio button. And so my case, I'll just show that as a radio button. Now this right here, if I select a radio button, it defaults to show that is required, meaning one of the options is required. If I do a combo box, I can check or uncheck this. And what that does for combo boxes is if this field is not required, it will show the none option available in that list. In this case, the computer case, it is a required field, and I'll just set it to radio button. A description is what that list of radio buttons will be called, or that group of radio buttons style. This status info, I can set an option to inactive, and what that will do is after a certain date, then that option will become inactive. The forms will automatically change. I don't have to go into the back end on that date and take it off the form. It'll just automatically do it. And so I can set, so for example, if you have a product that says, okay, after a certain amount of, maybe in a month, we're not going to offer this option anymore, or else it's going to be a standard option, then you can set that, and it'll just become effective as of that date. The standard selection here is once you set something to be inactive, just what your standard selection is going to be on that point going forward. So maybe, for example, maybe you might say, okay, after this date, we're only going to offer solid-state drives, and so your standard selection might be a solid-state drive. Your option choices is where you're going to list out what choices you have for that specific option. And so with the computer case, we have the full and the mini, so I'm just going to add one. The sequence here is the order in which those choices will be listed. And so selection code is basically a single character code that's going to identify that option. You can use any number 1 through 9, or any letter with the exclusion of the letter O. We excluded 0 and O just because they're too similar, and if you have a customer reading off this configuration code, we don't want that confusion to be there. So now I'm just going to have a description for this choice. The default here is basically if that choice is going to be selected by default when they first pull up the form. And so if I want to say, okay, this is going to be default, and this radio button, this option will be selected by default when I open up the form. Added list and added weight. And so my list price, so say for example, what it's going to do is take my base price, and I did forget to set one. I'll set one in just a minute. But so if I can set my base price for my default build, and then I can add or subtract dollar amounts based on what they select. So maybe a full case is going to add $50 to the price, and then it might add maybe half a pound to the weight. Your effective start and end dates, you have start and end dates for the different choices, and again it's similar to the inactive date. Anyways, as of a certain date, this choice will become available, or it will become unavailable. And when that date occurs, you pull up the configuration form, and that choice will be available or missing accordingly. So I'm just going to do today. Now this selection part ID, what this does is it allows you to tie that choice to a specific part. And so in this example I have a full case, and so if I want to select my full case here, then what it will do is as it calculates the selling price, it'll take my base price of this master revision and add in the price for this specific part, and as well add in this list price. And so maybe, for example, with this case, we might say if you buy it individually, it's going to cost you $100, for example. But if you buy it as part of a build, it'll only cost you $75. So it'll take the base price of the $100, subtracting this $25, and so really they're going to be paying essentially $75 for that case. These fields down here, the added short description and added long description, is what it's going to do is when they do the build, it's going to automatically generate a revision for that specific build. In our case, we had to track inventory by configuration, and so what it's going to do is it's going to generate a configuration code and create a brand new part, and then it builds the short and long description and so on based on what I have here. And so my base part says PC custom, and then here I can say, okay, well, this is going to be a full, and then I can actually add a long description. It's just going to append those and string those together. And then I'm just going to add my second choice, which is going to be my mini case. And also, as you can see, what happened too up here, originally I just typed in full case, but since I tied it to that part, it basically pulled in the description for that part. Added list, maybe it's not going to add any. Maybe with the mini case too, again with the weight, you can actually subtract weight as well in addition to adding it. So maybe in the mini case, it's going to subtract ½ pound from my default weight. Then also what it does too on the weight is it'll take the weight of this part, add in this, and add it to the base weight. And so that's my case. My next option will be my my processor. And what I'll do in this, and just to show an example, is I'll just show a combo box. I ran into a slight problem with the option code that I had originally set up for the case style. I used a VB script reserved word, and so it was throwing some error messages. I've since corrected that and put in some error checking to prevent that in the future. And so I just renamed it to form and form factor, which is a more accurate terminology. Now I'm going to show you what it looks like on the sales order side of things and what the configuration screen looks like. Just going to enter in my part and select the revision. Here's all my options that I set up. This case, this is what I selected as the default. Processor, AMD or Intel. Motherboard size, ATX or Mini, and so on. Hard drive, I selected that it was not required, so as you can see it does give me the none option. Storage capacity and so on. The unit price changed. My weight added ½ pound for the full case. Also what it does is if there is a price code or customer pricing discount, it applies that same discount percentage to the options. And so if a customer had a 10% discount and my motherboard was a $1,000 adder, it would apply a 10% discount to that $1,000, and so it would be a $900 adder instead. And so those customer discounts do carry over. On this, since I did have a case on it, if the case had a separate customer discounted price, it would use that instead of the standard discount. And so maybe on the case a certain customer would get a 15% discount, and so it would figure that in. Let me show you what happens if I change some of these options around. So say for example I want to list my processor first. It doesn't show it in the tree, but everything else is renumbered. So if I go into form factor, that did push that down to 2 on the list sequence. Now if I go back into my configured screen, you'll see that the processor is listed first. Again, it changes right on the fly. Maybe for my processor I have a combo box. I want to change that to a radial button. Again, come back in here, and as you can see, it changed to a radial button. And now maybe I don't want to offer a DVD-ROM anymore. I'll just set that to inactive. And then my DVD option is no longer viewable. Again, it's a lot of flexibility. There is no programming required for the end user to get this set up. Everything's all been done behind the scenes, and it's automatic. One thing it does too, kind of show you what these selection codes mean. And with us, we had the need to track inventory by configuration, but we did not want to have to set up a part ID for every single possible configuration beforehand. We wanted to do it on the fly. And so as a new configuration is selected or created, it'll create the part ID for it. And so what I have is I have my base part, which is PC, and then it has a period and then the configuration code. F is for the first option, which is my full AMD. M is my mini ATX. S is my solid state drive. 1 is a 1 terabyte drive. 0 is my DVD option. And that's what happens when you select none for something that's not required. It puts a 0 in its place holder. And so that's what we reserved it as. And so now if I go to my part listing, then you can see this is my master part, and then this is that configuration. If I go into my sales order, change the configuration on it at all, so maybe instead of a mini ATX motherboard, I'll just select an ATX, hit OK, and now this placeholder for my motherboard size got changed to an A. If I go back into parts, let me just jump and refresh it, and then you can see that that part was created. So the parts and the revisions are created on the fly as needed, which saves a lot of time, and you don't have to set up 100 different configurations beforehand. And this is just because we require parts to existing inventory. If you didn't require parts to existing inventory, you wouldn't necessarily have to have those created. We also added an option too on the revision that if you didn't want to create the configuration code and append it to the part, then you can check this box to keep the original part ID. It'll still configure it and still do all your options, but it just won't create a new part for it. It'll just use put everything under this master part and revision. Next we'll show you how to set up the bill of materials and what that looks like and how easy it is. Now if you noticed before, we had to set up every single option, both cases, and then you set up your rule to say, oh, in this scenario I want this case, or so on. Basically what we do is we set the default options, and so for my case, maybe my default is going to be my full case, and then right here we have our configuration settings. And so what this does is it I say, okay, what other options am I going to allow for this particular material in my bill of materials. And so I'm going to select my mini ATX case, and then the related options is what options is going to affect this decision to select this case. In this instance, it's just my form factor. If I select a mini ATX case, it'll change it to this in my bill of materials. If I don't select that, it'll jump back to my default here. My next option is going to basically be my CPU, and that's going to be a similar scenario. One thing too is I can also add in AMD down here if I wanted to. It doesn't make a difference in this in this case, it'll work the exact same way. Mainly if you have something that's used more than the majority of the time, you can set it here, then you can set your exceptions down here. But the other nice thing about this too is that you can have more than one option determine what is in your bill of materials. Okay, now I'll show what happens on the motherboard, because the motherboard is really determined by two different options, the motherboard size and the processor. I'm just going to select a default here. And now I'm going to add my configuration settings. In this scenario, I'm going to add all four to it, and not use the default. The default is required. It's kind of built-in M1 requirement, so you have to put something there. So what I'm going to do is, if I select a AMD processor and ATX motherboard, it's going to select this motherboard in my bill of materials. But then if I select an Intel processor and an ATX motherboard, it'll select this one. And I'll just add these two, and just to save time. So on the configuration settings, when you select a specific part based on the options, you can have any combination of options down here. It's not really limited to any of a specific number, but one thing to be aware of is the number of options that you can have with a specific, or what number of choices you can have with a specific option is limited really by the selection codes. Again, you can have the numbers 1 through 9 and the letters excluding any letter excluding O, so basically a total of 34 different choices for each option. The number of options you can have is limited by really the length of your part ID. If you are basically creating a configured part ID, or basically tracking inventory by part or by configuration, this field here is a maximum of 30 characters, and so basically here then you'd have the 2 characters for the part ID, the period separator, and then you can have up to 27 basically different options for this specific part. So that's what your limitations are on it. If you're not tracking inventory by configuration, the number of options you can have really is pretty much unlimited. I'm just going to jump in here and also show you what it looks like when you add the DVD-ROM. If you remember, we had that was a checkbox control, basically either on or off. And so in that case, what I'm going to do is the quantity per assembly is going to be 0. And then on my configuration settings, I'm just going to add it, and basically this down here is what's going to override anything up here. I can leave this part ID and revision blank, and if that is blank, then it'll just default or use this, but then it'll change the quantity to 1 on the assemblies. Just going to add my related option to be my DVD-ROM. Save that. Okay, so then the other thing too with the materials is we can actually, any of these fields right here, we can have it depend on the options. I just didn't add it in just because I didn't think we'd need it really that much, but it is something that is doable and wouldn't take that much additional programming to do. And then also we can do the same thing with the operations, is have those depend upon the options or configuration selected. Just kind of show you a quick example of that. And so now I can add in my configuration settings, and I can change the work center. So maybe instead, just for the sake of example, so normally it's going to be, the work center is going to be assembly, and the process is assemble per instructions. And then I can change my process long description. I can also change my quantity per assembly or my setup hour. So maybe my default setup hour is going to be 1 hour, but if I select, just for the sake of example, an Intel processor. Then my setup hours is going to be 2 hours, my standard factor, 2 hours per piece, production time 15 minutes, or actually 1 hour per piece. So I'll just change this to minutes per piece just to make it a little bit more interesting, so maybe 30 minutes per piece. And then again on the operations, any of the standard fields that is in the normal method operations table, we can have that depend upon the configuration that is selected. I just did the most common ones that I felt would be different based on configuration, but those would be very easy to do. We also have the same ability in the assemblies, so if you have a sub-assembly, you can basically have that dependent upon the configuration as well. I do not have the ability to pass configuration settings down to sub-assemblies based on this method. I think the default M1 application does allow that. I was not able to figure out how that works on the back end to replicate it through this customization. Now I'll show you what it looks like when you enter a job. Go ahead and select my configured part. Go ahead and configure this, my processor case. I'll just select this. We didn't have any of the materials dependent upon the hard drive. I didn't do that just for the sake of time. And we're just going to allow, anyway, select the DVD option on there. Hit OK, and as you can see, here's my DVD option. Let's jump on this so you can see them all in a list. So my ATX case, AMD processor, AMD ATX motherboard, and my DVD-ROM. My operations was assembly. Now if I change my processor to Intel, and we'll see what changes go there. And I'll just turn my DVD off, remove that, change my motherboard size, hit OK, and you watch the DVD does come off of the bill of materials. My operation did change to the other work center, and so as you can see that did as expected. 2 setup hour, 30 minutes per piece. And my materials changed as well. So then now I have my Intel processor and my micro ATX motherboard. So that's basically it on configuring using this custom configurator wizard that I created. There are a couple of limitations on it. Like again I mentioned, you can have a maximum of 34 choices per option. And then the number of options on any given part is really limited by the length of the we call it the master part ID, or the base part ID. With how this is set up, then the only controls that are in there are basically combo boxes, radial buttons, and check boxes. It didn't allow for basic text fields or plain numeric fields. It needs to have a predefined list in order for it to work. One of the other limitations that we have too that I have not been able to figure out a way around is compatibility checks. And so, for example, in this case, then for maybe your full size case will be able to fit a micro ATX and an ATX motherboard, but your mini case will only allow for a micro ATX motherboard. And so ideally you'd want to have some way that if they select the full size or a mini case, that the full size or the ATX motherboard is no longer an option. Those are filtered as different options are selected and deselected. It is something that I do want to do, but haven't been able to figure it out yet. I hope you've enjoyed seeing this and some of the things that we've been able to do in M1. There's more things that I'd like to do. One is I'd like to be able to get the configurator working using within the RMA system, as well as in purchase orders, because there's some applications and things that I could really simplify with the purchase orders too that will make it a lot easier. Also the pricing, which I got into a little bit, but you can set your pricing on your base part, and then set your adders and so on with each option that is selected. And again, it just creates one place to maintain your pricing, which makes it a lot easier than trying to maintain separate pricing for every single possible configuration, or even just trying to maintain your pricing in your rules and updating that each time you have a price increase or decrease, or add or subtract any kind of option. But anyways, let me know what you think in the comments, and I'll probably be posting more videos of some of the things that I've done in M1 to kind of showcase some of the things that are possible, and maybe even to get the M1 developers to incorporate some of these things into the base program.